I'm not criticizing those who do. I'm just curious. A lot of people give this as a reason they want kids, but I don't see how your bloodline continuing impacts you at all. Story 1. I am a link in a series of chains that stretch back to times long forgotten. I am who I am thanks in no small part to the decisions and true sacrifices of those who came before. The decisions and sacrifices I make in the name of family shall pass on for centuries to come. Hopefully. I am fulfilling my life's purpose, as I define it. Bruce, damit sexy. You people need a bit of Mike in the gene pool. I pretty up the place. Story 2. The bloodline doesn't bother me. Striving to do the best I can for a baby, child, or kid is what motivates me. That's why we are considering adoption. Story 3. I will die one day. I don't like the fact, but there is nothing I can do to stop it. However, if my DNA, knowledge, and traditions get passed on to the next generation, then there is a chance that they can keep getting passed on and a piece of me will live for a very long time, possibly forever. I don't really care if my name is attached or not. Story 4. I don't care if my son wants to change his name to Blood Bamboozle Whizmaster Funky Flex. When he turns 18, he can do that. As long as he's a decent person out in the real world, then I've done well and that would make me happy. Story 5. I'm the last man in my family with the surname. Carrying on the family name was important for my grandparents' generation, and my dad admitted he felt pressured to have a son because of it. Personally, I couldn't care less. I don't want children, and I would be miserable having them. Because of that, I'm not going to have any. My family name will carry on. I know there are people all over the world with my name, and my lack of children won't erase history. Plus, come on, we're not royalty. My ancestors were British and Canadian farmers, for crying out loud. Story 6. This is not my view. I'm just explaining it. It's about legacy and what you leave behind. Take, for example, William Shakespeare. We know his name over 400 years after his death because his legacy lives on in his writing. However, for most people, that's not the case. For most people, the best thing they leave in this world when they pass to the next is their children. Their family is their legacy. It's what makes it worth going to work every day when your work isn't going to be remembered in a month, let alone 400 years. But if you have children and they carry your name, then your name will live on. And if your son has a son and he has a son and so on, then in 400 years they may not remember Joe Schmo, but Paul Schmo will be continuing the line. Story 7. I don't care about my bloodline. To be honest, I would rather adopt than have my own child. With my current significant other, the plan is to have one child and adopt one. Story 8. Like the other guy said, it is hard-coded into every species to carry on their lineage. It is how life has survived. Other than that, my brother and I are the only boys in the family, so if neither of us has kids, then the family name dies with us. And that is a pretty unsettling thought for me. Also, I just really want kids. But that is not what the question is about. Story 9. I think the honorable thing for our species to do is deny our programming, stop reproducing, and walk hand in hand into extinction. One last midnight, brothers and sisters opting out of a raw deal. Story 10. The way I see it, there is something intangible in a bloodline that could be worth preserving and passing on. I know that sounds like fiction, but I don't know how else to describe it. I think family trees are an accomplishment in and of themselves, despite the circumstances of the branches, and there are commonalities between them that people will carry on generation after generation. Those commonalities could be anything. It doesn't have to be genetic. It could also be stories. I can directly link my ancestry to a man who was a real-life Wild West cowboy. I have photos of people who arrived on Ellis Island, who I'm related to. I also have Native American ancestors who were here before them. Think about that. Somewhere in time, many years ago, a person who was your family was alive and well and on a path that possibly contributed to your current existence. Don't you feel connected to them somehow? If that isn't the coolest thing ever, I don't know what is. Story 11. I honestly don't get it either, but of course not. I got snipped years ago. Maybe it's that my name isn't unique. Maybe it's that my dad never knew his actual dad. So my name is my dad's, but his dad's name is unknown. Whatever my actual family name is, I never knew it. It's hard to put a lot of importance on it. Story 12. I thought just like you at 23. I feel very differently about the topic at 32. You start to see life is bigger than you. But I also think people mean something bigger than just their bloodline. It's passing a torch that goes back before we were human, literally to the first iteration of life. There's something primal and satisfying about completing that transfer. Story 13, well, think of it from a long-term point of view. Billions of rats all struggled living as prey for bigger species for hundreds of millennia. All the time being hunted and injured as our species slowly changed to bigger rat-like things, then minor apes, then larger apes, finally culminating into the greater ape families. Then your ancestors somehow survived all the wolves, lions, Siberian tigers, bears, tribal battles, Neanderthal integration, with every last one of your male and female ancestors all managing, sometimes by the skin of their teeth, to find someone to make a child with, then manage to keep that child alive long enough for them to grow up. Also, they could carry on that cycle of surviving and having kids. They survived plagues, world wars, ethnic and religious cleansing, and that natural disaster where fewer than 1,000 humans survived. Some think it was closer to 100 all to make you. Then, with a single kid, they throw all those millions of years of effort away. The entire genetic line of trillions of lives wiped out in a single lifetime, and all the little mutations and slight changes that no other organism on the planet has because they had different ancestors. Story 14. Just to throw in my 2 cents, I don't care at all, and I also don't understand why other people care. I have no issue with people who do care, but I don't. I am just one of billions of people who have been alive. I'm not that unique. Don't get me wrong, I don't have bad self-esteem or self-loathing. I'm just honest. I'm a random guy in a random world. Why is my DNA important? It's not. Why is my family line important? It's not. I really couldn't care less if I have biological children or adoptive children. The genetic connection seems arbitrary to me. Story 15. My lineage represents an unbroken chain of successful lifetimes stretching back to the very dawn of life itself. To end it because of apathy would be hubris. Story 16. This is why I believe, by definition, that wanting to reproduce is selfish. It is of a person, action, or motive, lacking consideration for others, concerned chiefly with one's own personal profit or pleasure. The only reasons that a person would reproduce by choice are personal reasons. You want to have someone to love. You want to make someone who will love you back. You want someone who will take care of the things that you care about when you're gone. You are not doing it for anyone but yourself or people around you who are selfish for even expecting you to reproduce for their sake. My grandfather, for example, has been pressuring my brother and cousin to, respectively, make him a great-grandfather. He wants the title. If you reproduce, you are contributing to the scarcity of resources for people who already exist. More people mean less resources per person. Scarcity of resources leads to starvation, homelessness, and ultimately war and death. I think this qualifies as lacking consideration for others. I'm not saying people are evil for wanting to have families and love and all that, but by definition, it is selfish. Story 17. My father is obsessed with preserving the family name and family history. Based on observations, people who care about these things are usually those who never managed to make something of themselves or be as successful as they believe they should have been, so they rely on dead ancestors to give their life purpose. It's a character trait that evolves with age as one realizes their existence is meaningless. Story 18. Personally, my philosophical reason is that I feel an obligation due to being grateful to be alive. While I wouldn't mind just living without children and focusing on personal development and my own life, I value the gift of life and feel obligated to partake in the process that allowed my creation. In a way, following some version of the golden rule, act as you would have others act before or after you. Story 19. For the family name, people seem to think they are royalty or something. Newsflash, you are not a baron. Your family name does not matter, and you likely share it with countless people only loosely connected to you. Story 20. I wish I had changed my last name before having my children because my biological father is a deadbeat who is not worthy of passing down his name to my children. Story 21. If your family has a lot of pride or reputation in the area they inhabit, It is something that creeps into their psychology that they need to continue this idea of a reputation because it partially protects their offspring and is like a genetic advantage, only it's something that has no significant biological impact unless it helps your offspring reach a higher social hierarchy and mate with more healthy, attractive specimens. It can have a real-world impact on the future of your offspring, but to the one who is the old parent about to pass away, it's pointless and an ignorantly proud concept. I am named after my dad, who has a huge reputation around town. Not a great one, but he is known as a successful guy, just an asshole too, and I am nothing like him. I feel like he named me after him as an ego thing, thinking his name had some kind of power to it. I gotta say, though, people tell me all the time how elegant and full-bodied my name is, so I guess I got something out of it. Haha. Story 22. My stepfather is the last male in his family. He never had any biological children. I chose to take his last name and give it to my son. I didn't see it as a big deal, but the look in his eyes when I told him was priceless. Story 23. A bloodline or family name is one of the only things that links you to your ancestors, which is essentially always with you. While I would like to have my own child with my last name, to me, that's not essential. For me, what is essential is when I have a child, even adopted or raising someone else's child, I want to instill the values that were passed down to me by the generations before me. I want them to understand the struggles and challenges that my ancestors faced in order for me to live the life that I do, which allows me to provide what I can to my child. I want them to recognize that the actions of my ancestors were entirely so that their children and the generations that followed would have a better life than they did. I am who I am in part because of the actions and efforts of my ancestors before me, and I just think that is a really important lesson to explain and understand. I think that the lesson is more important than the name or blood, but it's a lot easier to explain the name than the people from the past. Story 24. I am the last male of this generation with my family's last name. I have 2 sisters and all female cousins. There has been immense family pressure to get married and have children. Story 25. Yeah, every now and then, it just hits me too just how illogical that change from female inheritance to male inheritance was. It was purely a decision made to remove women from the center of society. It's one of the first changes that happened during the time when the patriarchy was first created. If anyone is interested, here is a documentary on the early days of the patriarchy. Story 26. Why do many people care about carrying on the male or husband bloodline or name? Going to get downvoted and screamed at, but it's the truth. The original poster is asking on Ask Men because it's mostly a huge deal for men to pass on their family name or bloodline. Story 27. My father had that mentality. He's an abusive person, though, so I'm changing my last name. As of right now, it's Ledbury because his family ruined the Irish heritage I got from my other ancestors. If anyone has suggestions, I'm open to ideas. Story 28. I thought about it and wanted to before I started my transition, but now that my medication has made me sterile, I guess the line stops with me along with the carried name. I have a 4th suffix in my name. Story 29. Ego mainly. It's funny because nobody is going to remember or talk about any of us in 200 years unless we do something incredible, which almost nobody ever does. Story 30. Maybe they want to stave off that existential crisis that inevitably comes when you realize that your life is ultimately meaningless. Your whole existence can be summed up in several words. And when you die, there may be those who remember you, but when they go, nothing will be left of your legacy. Passing the torch from Chad to Chad Jr. will mean that he might hate you one day for inflicting your name on him, and his hatred will burn brightly forever. Story 31. My last name is Woodard. My father, my grandfather, and his father were all last-generation Woodards. I feel like I have some responsibility to continue that. I really want to have 2 sons so that there is a higher chance of my bloodline not dying out. Story 32. My partner's brother passed away recently. He is now the last person in his family to pass down his last name. While I know it's old-fashioned, there is a lot of family history tied to his name, so it's important to both of us, if we have children, to pass that down. I also have no attachment to my last name since my biological dad wasn't in my life, and it's important to me to have the same last name as my children, so I have no issue with it. Story 33. From an evolutionary standpoint, those who do not care about it rarely procreate. Therefore, their genes are not passed on. The ones who did care are more likely to procreate and pass on their genes. So over time, the genes related to caring about family survive, and the opposite ones do not. So there is an evolutionary bias toward this behavior. Story 34. Just think about yourself. If you're the only child in your family with no siblings or cousins, like everyone else, you are unique. Your family is unique. There are aspects to you and to your family that might not be represented anywhere else in our species. And however small or inconsequential they may seem right now, to lose them could cause ripples that drastically alter the future of our planet and humanity itself. You never know who or what might come along in your bloodline many centuries and many generations from now. We're talking about a line that has extended millions of years, from father to son, one generation to the next generation after generation, an untold number of times, passing down those unique attributes. And if you don't procreate, that impossibly long line, which has survived against all odds for millennia, will all die irrevocably, forever, never to be retrieved. All of your ancestors' struggles to persist will have been for nothing. All because of you. You will have failed them all. So, no pressure.